Physiologically, protein has lots of benefits. So protein is very high physiologically, and most people are pretty much easier to do that, way easier than sleep. So what I figured out to kind of solve the issue is something I call coaching leverage, which is the physiologic response times the psychology, the client's ability to change.
Dr. Mike T. Nelson is a physiologist who helps people get stronger, move better, and optimize performance using real science.
He's all about testing things on himself first and making complex ideas simple and practical.
What is your take and recommendations of tracking at the technology level so that there's some sort of rapid response or feedback that is accurate?
I'd say a couple things. Number one is,
in this episode, you're going to hear from a good friend of mine, Dr. Mike T. Nelson, creator of the Flex Diet and so many programs known well around the world. What I love about Mike is his ability to take very complex concepts and find the deep-rooted truth in science and then explain them so everyone could understand. He is one of the top performance coaches and researchers that I know, and it's a great conversation. Enjoy. Dr. Mike.
what's up, buddy? How are you? Good to see you.
Great, man. I appreciate you coming in town.
Yeah, thank you.
And we're going to have some fun together over the next couple of days. But for those that don't know who Dr. Mike T. Nelson is, who are you?
Oh, good question. So I run a business that does online coaching for mainly trainers right now, and then have different certifications, a Flex Diet Cert, which is basic nutrition and recovery, and then the Physiologic Flexibility Cert, which is looking at more things that make you resilient, anti-fragile, increase your recovery. And then I just did a new program that's cardiovascular training for lifting meatheads.
That's awesome. So I've been fortunate enough to spend a lot of time with you, and you're a man of many talents. One of them being, windsurfing.
Kiteboarding. I did start windsurfing. Oh, you're correct on that.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
But I did see your name on a few lists, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, how did you get into that?
I started windsurfing in 2002 because I always just saw it and thought this would be great. Finished college, was working for a cardiovascular med tech company, took 10 days off. A friend's like, oh, if you want to learn to windsurf, you got to come down to this place called Bon Air in the Caribbean.
Mhm.
Never been in the Caribbean, never been anywhere like that.
Which island did you go to?
So it's part of the ABC Islands, so Aruba, Bon Air, and Curacao. So we were in Bon Air, the island itself. I thought, great, well, in 10 days, I'll go learn to windsurf. Go down there. My buddy's like, hey, I'll teach you the first day. It'll be great. Get out there. He literally spent maybe 20 minutes. I couldn't figure it out. He never had taught anyone before.
It's like skiing where they say friends don't let friends
no.
teach you. That's
Terrible.
good.
Horrible idea. So I'm out there for like 2 days, just not knowing what I'm doing, just getting the shit kicked out of me. Show up for day 3. There's an instructor, I think, from Germany. She comes up to me. She's like, you back for day 3? I'm like,
You love punishment?
yeah. And she's like, and you have made no progress in 3 days. And I'm like, not really. She's like, no one makes no progress from us 3 days in a row, comes back for day 3. I feel bad for you. I give you a free lesson.
So the way you're sounding, I thought, the discipline and the direction was going to be like she's Russian, but the fact that she gave you free lesson, now I know she's definitely.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
What, I brought that up because I think one of the things that you do so well is you give people this, their body back and like their knowledge. You make very complex things quite simple. You make nutritional biochemistry, recovery methodologies, techniques, hormones, and you just break it down so that the average trainer could be able to deploy that for their clients. You do a really good job of that from a teaching standpoint. And the same thing too, when it comes to these, learning, whether it be windsurfing and kiteboarding and all of this crazy stuff that you do, you give people a little bit of hope around, hey, they could go do this fun stuff.
Oh, totally.
And I think that's like part of like who you are. You're a man of many talents, whether it be, playing instruments and music and enjoying other things. But what you're really good at is making the complex quite simple. And you're a really good teacher. You're also I think a lot of people don't know your humor.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's because it's like, you're monotone in a lot of ways in a lot of environments. And then all of a sudden it's just like, wait a second.
What was that?
That was
Sounds like a Muppet.
Yeah. But you're fun to be around. And I just think it's cool to kind of share that story with the world. But how you started, right? Like you got into like with what you do now, it's a collection of many different intellectual assets, I would call them. And you have many different expertise in different disciplines, but it comes from a lot of practical use. One of the things that I know about you is that you don't enjoy working with people that are just on the research side or just on the training side.
Yeah.
It's that you're the crossover between those two
Applied
relationships.
research.
Exactly. And you're so good at that. You lift every day, you train, you take care of yourself, but you're always constantly looking at what is not just on the cutting edge, but what is the root behind why something got trendy? What is the background behind it? Where did that kind of innate behavior come from? Was it something that you had when you were younger?
I think so. I was always curious on how things worked. And so as a kid, I would take stuff apart and never get it back together.
Oh, like your RV car, like take them apart.
I did. I had a radio controlled car.
Radio controlled cars were the worst because you take them
Yeah.
apart and you think they're Legos where you could put them back together, but you can't put those back together.
Yeah. And I was always
Stay in a shoebox.
constantly modifying it, racing it, doing different things.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And it was fun because like you said, sometimes it goes back together, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you broke it. Sometimes the modifications you spent a day doing worked really well.
And
Sometimes
sometimes
it didn't. But it was nice because I realized you could test it, right? So you could take it to the race. You could then see if the thing you did actually worked or not. And so that initially I went in engineering because I thought, well, that's a good mix of how things work. And at the time, biomedical engineering in the 90s wasn't really a thing.
Yeah.
And I liked the biology side, but I didn't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
So I decided to go into mechanical engineering instead.
So that's how you got your start.
Yeah.
And then how did you go from that to like nutrition and training? Like how did you switch over to the physical performance side and research side?
Yeah. I always liked that side. So when I did my undergrad at St. Scholastica in Duluth, Minnesota, they had a program where you could take anatomy and physiology. Anyone could to sign up for anatomy and physiology. And you actually worked on actual real cadavers. You got new cadavers like every quarter, which was unheard of for an undergraduate program.
Yep.
And so I just took that class for fun.
Sure.
And as I went on and took more classes, I remember when I was doing my master's work at Michigan Tech in mechanical engineering, I just went to the guy who was teaching exercise phys, which is a 400 level class, and just said, can I just audit your class? He's like, what do you mean audit? I'm like, I'm maxed out on credits. The university can't get any more money from me. I don't need the credits. I just want to learn about exercise phys. He's like, well, this is a 400 level class. I'm like, yeah. It's like, well, I can't really sign you into the class, but if you show up every day at 10 a.m. on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm not going to like kick you out. I was like, oh, great. This is so cool. So I just like the learning aspect of it. And like most people, you go to college, you start lifting because I was the same height that I'd been 6'3" since 9th grade, maybe. Weighed like 156 pounds. And
What years were this? Only because Michigan Tech has a really good exercise physiology.
They do now.
That most people don't know about. So I'm asking, was it before or after?
Oh, it was before.
Because I know a lot of the guys
They
there.
just started.
Okay.
This was like the first year. So this was, let's say I graduated from their master's program in 1999. I started there in 96, 95. So I think it was like 1998. They had just hired a guy who worked for NASA. He was the guy who did all the aerospace research.
Nice.
Worked with a lot of the cosmonauts. And so he was the first exercise phys person that they hired.
That's cool backstory because they brought the same people from the cosmonaut program, but in the race for space in Russia over, later on, right? With Vorozhensky and some other really started to invest into that program just because of the relationships. But that was probably, I would say early 2000s. So that was much later. So you weren't privy to some of those relationships, but you now know a lot of those people today, which is really cool. But I didn't know that about Michigan Tech. It's really cool.
Yeah. And my research, even though my graduate work was in solid mechanics, biomechanics, meant stuff, how shit breaks, they couldn't get any funding. So they had just started the Center for Biomedical Engineering. So I went over there and they said, hey, we got this new project. It's for collision avoidance systems on cars. It's the microwave in the gigahertz range. We have money. Do you want to do this? I'm like, sure. So unfortunately, I had to go back and learn heat transfer 1, heat transfer 2, conductive heat transfer. And I built a computer-generated model of a monkey in front of a big-ass microwave transmitter. And so you took the microwave transmitter, you zapped the monkey, and they wanted to see, is there any deep tissue heating effects? Oddly enough, it was sponsored by Brooks Air Force Base in Texas. And I'm like, what does Brooks Air Force Base in Texas care about collision avoidance systems on cars? And they're like, I don't ask, And I'm like, okay, whatever. And then 5 years after I graduated, there's this little thing in the paper. My advisor sent me this. He's like, it says military declassifies ray gun. He's like, oh yeah, by the way, this is your thesis you published. I'm like, oh. He's like, it was so classified we couldn't tell you it was classified. I'm like, yeah, it seemed a little hokey, a little weird at the time. So
Well, cool. Well, thank you for helping making Americans safe or more dangerous or more powerful, one or the other.
yeah, they actually used it for the military has something called active denial system. So they actually took this big microwave transmitter, put it in the back of a truck, and you point it at a crowd of people, and it feels like your skin is being burnt by a light bulb, but there's no deep tissue heating because it's in the gigahertz range, and then people disperse. So originally it was designed for non-lethal crowd dispersion.
Yeah, for like riots and
Yep.
environments like that, crowd control. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Probably the wavelength probably attaches like breaking up water and everything else. That's pretty.
You light up the sympathetic nerve endings on the
That
skin.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Quite cool.
Yeah.
So for those that don't know how microwaves work, it may be valuable to explain that so that we understand the context of how that actually works.
Yeah. So your normal microwave.
Bring you back to like your studios too.
So your normal microwave in your house, I believe, is 2450 megahertz, and the different frequency determines penetration depth. So your microwave is designed to penetrate and excite little water molecules that heat it up. If you had a microwave in your house that was in the gigahertz range, you would basically burn the outside of the food and the inside would be completely frozen. It wouldn't do anything to touch it.
Exactly.
So as you scale up in frequency, you drop in penetration. So they were using things in the gigahertz range. The penetration depth is maybe 1 or 2 millimeters. It looked like there's no deep tissue heating effects. So you can kind of customize it where it is. And supposedly, I don't know if you know where the original microwaves came from,
I'd love to know.
but the story is a guy was working on one of the microwave transmitters in the military, and he had a candy bar in his pocket, and he was the tech working on it. Someone didn't turn it off. They had accidentally left it on, and the candy bar in his pocket started melting. And later,
it's fine.
yeah, everything else was fine. So then later they went, oh, maybe we can use this to, cook food and do other things.
It's cool. Yeah. Just this kind of like idea of like a vibration effect of
Yep.
water,
Yep.
which is why your mom probably just sprinkle a little bit of stuff on there and throw a little towel on top so that, it's got something actually to heat up, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
But it's amazing to me that, you start to take this deep level of understanding of physics and science and mathematics, and you start to apply it into like everyday people's lifestyle. This ability that you could, and you're also quite practical. We've discussed this many times.
Yeah.
We talk about like the critical things that people need to get healthy, whether it be movement, whether it be sunlight, whether it be training, like a stimulus, whether it be recovery. And one of the main areas that every high-end mass media health advocate will say is the number one thing that's causing a downhill graph rate of people's health is sleep.
Sure.
And as coaches, I go, well, that's not really helpful.
No, it's a horrible advice for most coaches.
It's the worst.
Yeah.
And I think that you and I are maybe the only people that have been outspoken about this.
Yeah.
And like, why? And I think that's like, I'm so glad that you're here so that we could explain this to everybody, at least our perspective from people that work with hundreds and thousands of people on a regular basis, consistently over many, many years, that we could confidently tell you that telling people to get better sleep and to get longer sleep is bad advice as a coach.
Yes.
Because practically speaking, it is the most impractical solution to their problem.
Yeah.
And that's not how we want to achieve it. Can you give me your opinion on why giving somebody sleep first advice is not very helpful?
Yeah. And part of this, I learned this by making this mistake. So I started reading some stuff on sleep. You started looking in recovery, and even before, Matthew Walker's book and before Sleep Was Trendy, you realize, oh, wow, this is an issue. And you start even just tracking what time you went to bed, what time you get up. Like, oh my gosh, like your issue with stress and recovery is sleep. So you have the discussion, hey, let's try to get to bed earlier. You go through the whole 9 yards. And what you end up with is someone has a job. They don't want to give up their kids for adoption. They've got to drive. They got to train. And now they want to relax for 2 hours at night, watch Netflix. And I, as a coach, am telling them, well, screw that. You don't get 2 hours of time by yourself. You should just go to bed. it almost becomes this sort of value judgment on their life that they can't extract more time from somewhere else. But then in my brain, I'm going, well, but all the physiology data, all the research says this. And so what I figured out to kind of solve the issue is something I call coaching leverage, which is the physiologic response times the psychology, the client's ability to change. So if you put like a 1 through 10 on each one of those, we may rate sleep as physiologically maybe like a 9, maybe a 10. It's very, very high. In a perfect world, if you could hit someone over the head and get them to sleep more, lots of stuff improves.
If you could do that, sign me up.
Yes. The downside is the coaching leverage in terms of the psychology, the client's ability to change is like a freaking 1,
If that.
if that. So your aggregate score is a 10, which puts it in my little viewpoint almost dead last, because we're not taking into account the psychology of getting someone to actually do that. And when you're coaching someone, you have to do things that are going to move the needle, like physiologically. And then I call it rigging the system in their favor. Like most people have all sorts of things you could start with.
Yeah, I call it passing the baton in first place.
Right.
Why you trying to
There's a-
chase from behind?
Right. There's tons of things you could start with, like eating more protein. Most people think, oh my gosh, you're telling me to eat more or something? I thought I had to be on a diet and just eat less all the time. Physiologically, protein has lots of benefits. So protein is very high physiologically, and most people are pretty much easier to do that, way easier than sleep.
Of course.
So my argument is when you have all these options, like pick the one that has the most leverage, both the physiologic response times the client's ability to change. And then over time, when you have more leverage with them, you've got some of the big rocks done, they're training, they're doing their cardiovascular, nutrition's not a floating trash bin fire. You've got some pull with them because you've shown them things that are beneficial. They now believe what you're saying because they can feel the difference. They can see it in their performance and their body comp. Now you can probably have a discussion about sleep, and they're more willing to be like, oh man, this guy, he's right on these other 9 items. Like, okay, I'll give in. I'll try to go to bed like a half hour earlier or things like that. But starting with that conversation is just a freaking disaster.
When things are not practical, you just create more anxiety because then they.
Oh yeah, now they're worried about it. Now they have more awareness, but they're not doing anything about it. Then you add sleep trackers, which I like, but then they start looking at it and they go, oh my gosh, this is horrible. Now I feel worse because I've looked at the data, but I'm still not in a position to do anything about it. And yeah, it's just not a good place to
We'll
start.
get to tracking in a bit because I
Yeah.
think it's a great conversation. I'd like to give my take on sleep coaching.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things that we know that are pretty consistent. Most people's alarm clocks are pretty consistent. They're going to get up consistently in the same range in the morning. What's inconsistent is when they go to bed.
Yep.
And the variance between that has to do with stress management, lifestyle stresses, and so many different factors, right? So looking at this as like as a broad spectrum of potential issues that could come in there to interrupt their pattern. The pattern interruption is going to happen throughout the day. And one thing that happens at, let's say, 8:30, 10 o'clock, 11, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 7 o'clock at night is going to affect when they go to bed.
Yep.
It's not going to affect when they wake up.
Yep.
So all of these changes that affect their day because they have more work to do, because something happened with their kids, something happened with, their day at work that they have to like focus on, something happened at their house, the toilet overflowed, anything that affects their day, that creates more stress and it pushes back this timeline. It also pushes back their ability to kind of downregulate that they need to do to be able to get to bed. So it doesn't affect their alarm though. They
Right.
still have to, in most
Yep.
cases, wake up Monday through Friday at a consistent time because of general work. And what I have tended to do is like, okay, well, what can we do to get them to understand the priority? Well, what you do is if they're going to give you 45 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour of working out, well, then what we could do is we could actually set that up to where now they want to go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
What we can do is actually get them to see how their body responds to certain types of food so that they are not, up at night longer. So they could actually, it makes it easier to go to bed. Maybe we could set up certain routines for them that aren't pattern behaving, that are triggers for the negative.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, if somebody is going to chill and watch Netflix before they wind down and go to bed, but that part of a triggering mechanism similar to a coffee and a cigarette, right? Your addicts is the snacking portion of their day happens when they're working with Netflix. So like, can you set it up to where you're creating coaching substitutes that make it easier for them to go to bed?
Yes.
And that's what we try to do first. But then we also start to prioritize, as far as in the coaching side, highlighting that they're doing a really good job in those areas. So they want to do more. And then once the consistency creates enough of a foundation to where we can have intensity in those areas, the intensity will get them to now drop back down again. And now that they drop back down, they're more prepared for sleep. And then we can start to say, let's have a night routine, not a morning routine. So we tend to, in the coaching space, focus all about morning routines. But again, very impractical. You gotta wake up, you gotta, check your measurements, you have to weigh in, you gotta brush your teeth, you gotta take a shower, you have to do your meditations, you gotta do your morning coffee, you have to do your ounces of water and all of this other stuff and your sun salutations and whatever you need to do in your gratitude journal before you even start your day. It's like, shit, man, like I got work to do. So it becomes very unpractical. And that impracticality means that people aren't going to do it. And it's unlikely that they're going to gain progress from something that they're not practicing. So we just run a prioritization, and then we start to do a substitute. So we start to add into environments things that will then make them want to do the hardest thing, which is sleep.
Yep.
And that's the thought process that we go through.
Yeah. And I would agree with that. Like you can also get some pretty big pickups in sleep quality, just by changing their environment, changing their bedroom, stuff that they don't have to then continually, like you said, think about all the time. Like maybe they wear blue blocking glasses at night, or their temperature is already cooler at night. They've got room darkening shades they've already pulled.
Yeah.
Like those things that they can get quality pickups so they can start to feel a little bit better. And like you said, they can then sort of expand from there. But always they're going back upstream. So if they tend to overeat at night, well, maybe we'll move some of your calories more during the day or add more protein in the evening. So you're still eating, you're still doing some of the things, but like you said, you're moving them towards a better direction.
Absolutely. And one thing regarding like kind of passive modalities that will help with both recovery and state and also energetically, I think are really valuable because they take no effort of the consumer.
Yep.
So having good lights in your house make a huge impact. Having really good materials that you sleep on, as far as cotton sheets or silk or something that is a natural fiber that's really good for your body. Having a water filtration system inside of your whole house system, so it's not just what you're drinking after, but like a reverse osmosis throughout the entire home, and then a water softener for the ones that are in your bathroom, and then having just the organic elements of your day-to-day life be something that you don't have to think about, that will just start to, it removes the toxins, but what it will end up doing is it'll start to like, you'll get a little bit of a natural boost and you won't even notice it until you start taking it away. These impacts, it's similar to the vitamins that are not on the stimulant side. You don't really notice that you're deficient in them until you start taking them for a while, and then you start removing it. So a lot of times people don't notice it until they start taking something away. So when you start adding it, they're like, well, I don't feel better. Well, wait a second. You didn't really know how you felt before. So then that conversation moves us into the data tracking, and whether it be an Oura Ring or HRV or, any sort of technology platform, what is your take and recommendations of tracking at the technology level so that there's some sort of rapid response or feedback that is accurate?
I'd say a couple things. Number one is pick your battles, right? So what do you want to track? Usually the thing you want to track, you should have some sort of behavior attached to it. So for example, if you're looking at sleep, we will look at what time you go to bed, what time you get up, right? Just as an example. So you as a client said, okay, I'm bought in on the sleep stuff. We've been working together for 9 months. I'm going to go to bed a half hour earlier. Cool. Now, if I have a device, Garmin or Apple Watch, whatever, they're pretty reliable at seeing what time you lay down and what time you get up in the morning. Sure. It's just a signal and accelerometer. Most devices are pretty good at that. So now as a coach, I have verbal commitment from you. You can do motivational interview and rate it on 1 to 10 scale. Now I'm going to evaluate you on this thing. And I'm going to use the technology in the background to maybe sync to some online platform where you don't have to log anything per se, but each week at check-in or each day or whatever your frequency is, I'm going to basically check on how you're doing on that. I
Absolutely.
mean, if you're doing good, great. Hey, this last week, everything was good. Went to bed, got up, great. Oh, what happened on Thursday night or Friday night? To tell me more about that so you can work through it. I think a lot of people just throw technology at something,
Mm-hmm.
and the person gets up in the morning, they look at their Aura score or whatever score it is. There's like 1,700 things on there. Now they're all freaked out about stuff that, one, you don't have any agreement on you're going to work on. Two, you have to pick which things are actually going to be accurate.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking at Aura, which I like, or any system, the equation for REM sleep and deep sleep and these different stages of sleep is probably the most inaccurate thing on it. But things like when you went to bed, what time you got up, heart rate during the night, maybe HRV, there's some other metrics that are much better and are much more accurate that I would base things on that, like the REM score and deep sleep. I mean, I look at it, but I'm only looking for slight changes on it.
Yeah. And I think like shout out to this idea of integration,
Right.
because I think that's a really big takeaway. This idea, like I believe in work-life integration, not work-life balance, because
Yep.
anybody that's in balance is probably not optimized to reach their goal. But you need to have an integration.
Yep.
And it's the same thing within the technology. You need to have what are you testing, and then a technology to back up the accuracy, and then that needs to be integrated. Same
Yep.
thing within, a Garmin or an Apple Watch or an Aura Ring, and then integrating that into Coach Catalyst so that it's your coaching platform,
Yep.
so that you get the data all in one place, and then you could do something with it. It's more about what is usable than what is actually heard.
Yes.
Because like, what are you gonna do with it that matters? That's what I care about the most. So my approach, and I throw this out there to you because I think that there's some coaching that could happen just right now, maybe ways to make this better. So my approach on the analytics of data tracking through technology is that most people get OCD about it.
Oh, yeah.
They get so consumed, and then it
Especially
wrecks.
on their own.
Yeah. No guidance is like,
Right.
it's basically, like having no guardrails at all. It's like, imagine like a bowling alley, but instead of actual lanes, they had the pins set up like they were in the right lanes, but you took the lanes and the gutters away, and it was just a basketball court. And then you're basically telling everybody like, okay, go ahead, like hit your pins.
Yep.
And like you're gonna have some crosshairs that are gonna get hit and not be a fun night.
Oh, yeah.
And you're playing bumper carts with people. So what I tend to do is analog track the data. How do they feel analog? And then digitally track it, and then go back retroactively to see how that is affected. We know sleep deprivation kicks in like 48 to 72 hours later. Like you could get by with that one all-nighter, but it will take its effect to you hormonally and everything else later on. There's lagging effects to these things. So when you wake up in the morning and you're looking at your Aura score, that's not going to tell you if you have a good day. That's not going to tell you if you're going to have a great workout.
Yeah.
But if you actually look backwards on it and you say, hey, I had some really good days, I started to feel low here, and then you could start to see what this, how's it correlate, and then you could start to extract that over time, then you could actually get some valuable data. And I think that this is what happens when people are left to their own devices. The technology enhances behavior. It doesn't create it.
Yeah. Or you make people more aware about how bad they feel and they feel worse.
Yeah, because all it's doing, it's enhancing their behavior. So if somebody is also like a hyper, analytical person, and then they're going to analyze the data, but they don't know what to do with it. They just get more freaked out about the data.
Yep.
But if you could actually have somebody that's a coach in your shoes, where you're sitting there saying, hey, let me interpret this for you. This doesn't mean what you think it means. A low score doesn't mean a low day. A high score doesn't mean an awesome day. A low score may mean that we may need to do something to get your nervous system up to have a good day. So I care more about how do you change somebody's state.
Yep.
Now, when you look back at that data, what do you do to help people change their states throughout the day if they're having a low energy day?
Yeah, and I think this is where HRV is really good, right? So heart rate variability, looking at the status of the autonomic nervous system. It's not probably the best tool for prediction, but I equate it to it's really good at looking at cost. Right. So if you had poor night's sleep, your HRV the next morning might be okay, but it's going to show up later. And then you have this thing of what are the things you can change? So on the training side, if someone said, oh man, I just didn't sleep well last night. I don't feel very good today. I was supposed to do a heavy and hard day, but the next day is an easy cardio day. I'm like, cool, let's just flip the two. Sure, let's do the easy cardio today. We'll do the heavier training tomorrow, and you feel a little bit better.
And you get better you get better results because the inputs are going to be better.
Yes. Yeah, in the grand scheme of the week, it didn't change anything.
No.
They still got like the same amount of work done, but I guarantee they got a higher level of work done, and you're not digging this bigger ditch that you have to then fill in later.
Yeah, my greatest advice from my dad has always been when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging.
Yeah, yeah.
And what happens is people they dig themselves into a problem instead of realizing they just need to climb out of the current situation they're in by stop doing the same pattern. We run into the technology side and then we overanalyze it. We need a coach to kind of interpret the data. And we're trying to change our state to do that. Omega Wave is a great platform to potentially do that, to where we find out if we're having some good days and bad days. I've done a lot of consulting at the college football level, and one of the biggest things that I implemented is game day readiness tests on Omega Waves. And I'll be proud to say, or not proud to, the scientist, that we manufacture those results for the athlete on game day.
Yeah.
So Monday through Friday, Sunday through Friday, their scores are whatever their scores are. We accurately cite the things. When someone tests on Saturday, when it's game day, and they used to get their score, we would give it to them and they would have a bad day, and they would feel like in their own head, they'd have like a little
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Well, they would have this moment where they're just like all up in their head, right? That sixth central, what's between the ears is causing a problem. And they just start to be like psychoanalyze how they're doing, and they're freaking out and whatever. And they're like, oh my God, like, I don't feel so good. I didn't sleep that well. My score was down. It was a huge problem. And I was like, hey, coach, like, just tell them their score was amazing. And like, no, we can't do that. They see the scores. Like, cool, print out the results and just show them that they're like ready to rock and roll. And people would come back with like just shit Omega Waves test. And we would tell them like, dude, you are green lit all day today. Let's effing go. And the kid would be like, coach, I don't know what it is. I didn't sleep at all. I didn't feel like I felt good, but man, I feel amazing. We'd go and ball out, and we would die. And then then later on, we would have to have like hard conversations with them and be like, hey, listen, you could do this. So more often than not, it's in our head because we're able to change our state. Technology, I think, is really cool because on the HRV side, testing platforms, Omega Wave, Aura Ring, what other tech tools do you use?
I use Athlete for HRV. There's Lead HRV. There's different measurement systems that can do that. Yeah.
And what I like to see on the therapeutic side, or in the treatment side, or enhancement side, does somebody's treatment actually change? Like, I don't want to get into the idea of like, does it work or not, but is there any sort of change when you do something? And a good example is, I think we both use dolphins.
Yep,
right?
I do.
So I use a number of like vagal nerve stimulators to help with the nervous system, and a lot of different recovery methods as well. I got to show you one now. That's a really cool one.
Oh, nice.
Clips on the I'll show it to you. I actually brought it for you, and I travel with it, but I'll put the vagal stim on, run that, and then use HRV as a measurement to find out, like, did this device actually change anything?
Totally.
And it's really cool when you're like, oh shit, this shit works. So what have you found from actually using one technology, from a treatment or therapy product, to actually a measurement system for tracking, to help with not actually just your body, but how your body's adapting to that type of a stimulus?
Yeah, in terms of like recovery or that type of thing.
Anything like that, because you have so many, you have your hands in so many different recovery methodologies that you've somewhat like pulled back the curtain a little bit to what's really happening in the research with people.
Yeah. So a couple of things I'll use on that. If they have any midline scars on dolphin, that definitely is something I would work on for sure. Like, I've seen huge changes in HRV with that will stick. Like, meaning we'll measure it acutely, and then we'll measure it the next day or the day after that. And sometimes 2-3 days later, you'll see an increase in baseline.
Nice.
I do a lot of RPR, reflexive performance reset.
Everyone makes mistakes in life.
Yeah. And with that, like,
shout out to you and Cal.
Yeah.
You could tell the other one to go kick rocks.
Yeah. And the main thing with that, it's just a good way to increase breathing mechanics.
Sure.
So if you can get better breathing mechanics, whatever methods you're using with that, you'll almost always see better, more parasympathetic HRV scores.
Let's explain that because I think that a lot of times you hear people, we were just with Huberman and he
Yep.
was to the masses going parasympathetic, sympathetic, parasympathetic,
Yeah.
sympathetic. And he was going, and that's great. Like my background's in biology with a concentration in neuroscience. And
Yeah.
we understand what he's talking about. But even to the average coach and trainer, to the average adult that's trying to live a high performance lifestyle, what does that mean?
Yeah. So real simply, you have the autonomic nervous system. And I explain it to clients as, imagine you've got a car and you're going to step harder on the brake. So the brake is your parasympathetic rest and digest side.
Mm-hmm.
You're stepping harder on the brake. You're increasing the parasympathetic tone, or what's called vagal tone.
Mm-hmm.
And then your heart rate will slow down. You'll be more on the relaxation side. On the sympathetic side is like the gas pedal of the car. You push down harder on the gas pedal. You do get more performance from the engine acutely. But if that goes on, you end up having a little bit of a higher cost because you're inducing more stress.
Yep.
Inducing more stress isn't a bad thing. Everyone thinks that's a negative. When you go train, you definitely want times and periods where you're inducing stress, but you want to see that that person can come back down from that. There's something I call like HDR, human dynamic range. So how far down can you go? How high can you go? And now how fast can you switch back and forth between those states? So if you're going to train, you want to be upregulated. You want to be more on that sympathetic side. But when you're done training, you want to downregulate. You want to get back to baseline faster so that you can now start to recover. It's like a car, right?
Yep.
If you're racing, you want high performance. You're probably going to redline it a little bit. But when you're done, you don't want the car idling at like 4,000 RPMs and start moving.
Yeah.
Right now, you're just exerting more cost for no performance
And you
benefit.
don't want the car to be able to, you don't want that car to still be spinning
Correct.
when it's supposed to be idle.
Right.
And this is, the idea for me would be rate of recovery.
Yes.
So in these micro moments, I would look at, you have your concept on range. I would look at it as rate of recovery in each different segment. So what is what is the rate of recovery in between sets? What is the rate of recovery in between the workout and kind of being not in that state? What is the rate of recovery from that workout to the next workout?
One. Yep.
Exactly. And if you don't have range, what happens is people can't downregulate just to go to sleep.
Right.
So
So
then
then becomes a huge issue.
because they realize, like, if I work out late at night, which I'm a night workout, I like working out at night, which is bad.
Yeah.
And for someone who doesn't sleep well, and
That's even worse.
it's like pushing me into 3-4 in the morning on a consistent basis.
Yeah.
So this is a tool along with the Dolphin and some others that I found to actually have great results. But yeah, it's just clips on the ear.
Oh, that's cool. Which tool is that?
So it's called the Parasym.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So I figured I'd show it to you. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. That's sweet.
But I think what's cool is the ease of use.
Yeah, you just put it on, hit a button, hit start.
It's amazing.
I know.
Dude, it's just so much easier. Like, and you think about like going back in like the day when we would start this, right? When we were working on these tools, so different,
And you could just, again, it's a passive therapy, so you could do other things while that's on them.
That's where
Right, you're putting them in a parasympathetic state while you're working on it.
I just clipped that right here, wrap around my ear, throw my little earpiece on, and then crank that baby up and call it a day. And then I could do it while I'm here. Now it's probably not the most optimal for me trying to downregulate my system while I'm doing that, but I'll do it in the morning and at night pretty consistently. And I have some fantastic measurements. I don't know if they're results, but measurements that are showing that there's some change that's happening. Again, not moving it into the conversation around, is it working?
Right.
Moving it into the conversation of, is there change?
Right. And you would assume then, because you're looking at performance over a bigger time scale, that, hey, we implemented this thing, we saw an acute change. Great, we see this acute change each time. Now when we zoom back out and look at the course of 8 weeks, 8 months, 8 years, oh, wow, it looks like this thing we did is actually getting us to the goal faster.
It's the compounding effect, the ability to have like 1% better every single day over a long period of time. As long as that change in that 1% is in the right direction, you're going to have a huge impact.
Yeah.
So I really like that. Now let's move focus to, you talked about like you want to create a stimulus when you train.
Mm-hmm.
Now you like to lift and you like to lift heavy. But you have such a range of coaching abilities. Like you really do. You have a lot of tools in your toolbox. What's your kind of go-to methodology for training?
I say at a high level, I differentiate between what's called eustress and distress. So eustress, Eustress. is stress that you can do something and you can generally be recovered in a shorter time period.
What
So
range is time? What do you?
yeah, so if we did a heavy session on Monday, Tuesday maybe is a little bit easier cardio day. Wednesday, I'd want you to be ready to go again for a moderately heavy session.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be a eustress model.
Got it.
A distress typically ends up being a competition day. Like powerlifting is an easy example because competitions are relatively rare. Everything's measured. It's a maximal strength thing.
Yeah.
So if you're doing a meet, that's going to be a distress day. We don't really care how much longer it takes you to recover on the back end because we normally have plenty of time.
Sure.
All we care about is performance on that particular day. We're not worried about trying to manage a whole lot of costs. Just don't get injured. Now, if you start getting into other sports, it gets a little bit trickier because you've got multiple games that then get, sort of compressed. So your time windows are a little bit different. But what I like about that model is it then gives you, how do you make decisions within the week? We talked about, like, if you didn't feel good on Monday, maybe we flip Monday and Tuesday. So that allows a higher level of performance. We're still in the Eustress model. We can hopefully recover and we can generally keep on that same sort of plan. And within each one, then you're looking for some sort of change in performance over time, right? So performance for lifting would be volume, density, and intensity. So intensity here, we're talking about percentage of 1RM. Like how much did you lift? How much work did you do? About what sort of time did it take you?
Okay. And then density?
Density is just volume divided by time.
Okay.
So I do
Why is that important?
So I do a lot of work with density because it's an easy way to get sort of a repeated stimulus. But if you're getting more fit and more efficient at that thing, your cardiovascular system is getting better, you should be able to do that same amount of work in a little bit less time. And also with people who don't have an unending amount of time to train, at some point you have to kind of take their training and compress it to get that same amount of work in less time because they typically are constrained on the time. Like they may only be able to lift for an hour or do something for 1 hour Monday through Friday. So if you're constantly adding volume, you'll run up against their own constraint of, okay, now if I want to do high quality volume, I have got to recover between each set, but I can't add any more volume because I'm running into this time constraint. So at like the highest level, the first question I ask clients and athletes is, how much time do you have to train? Where do you train? What equipment do you have? And try to build things within a system that I know they can execute already versus I may give you a air quotes optimal plan. But if it says to lift for 2 hours on Monday and you've only got 1 hour, well, that program's just going to be crap before it even starts.
It's funny you say that because people that have looked at programs of mine in certain environments, they'd be like, oh, this is how CAV programs. But if you look at an individual environment, you'll see how I program completely different. And they're like,
Yes.
there's like these patterns are so different. I'm like, well, in a sports performance market, private sector, and I have to run a little bit of a machine, right? Where I have to like take people through 200 kids a week on a consistent basis that are ripping through this seasonally. And they also have to work together, and then where limitations based upon racks and weights and spaces, and there's a pod structure that we're rolling through. It needs to all flow from a safety perspective, but it also needs to flow from a oversight perspective, a coaching perspective. So there's supersets. There's a lot of different things where you hit one area, you go hit the other thing, you go from this area to the gym, you go to that area of the facility. A lot of that is just time management.
Oh, yeah.
Give you an individual program. There's less supersets than you've ever seen before because it's like you're gonna work, you're gonna rest, you're gonna work, and you're gonna rest.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't realize that is like they are adapting college training programs, professional athlete programs, youth performance programs, bodybuilding programs, individual splits, and then they're trying to see like, well, this is the type of workout I want to do. But in reality, it's like, what are the restraints? Artificial or not, right? You could create an artificial restraint around the fact that like maybe the artificial restraint is I have endless amount of time to work out, but you need to create an environment that says, hey, I only want you in the gym for 90 minutes max. You love being in there for 2 hours, but at some point it's not gonna be
quality drops off.
Yeah. So like, let's just say, hey, let's keep the entire thing to 90 minutes in that building. And let's start the clock the minute you walk through the door. And then you can have the conversation. It's an artificial restraint because the person has all the time in the world.
Yep.
And then you deal with somebody who's like, listen, I got 30 minutes to get it in, and that's it. And that's not an artificial restraint. I have to push things out of my life to be able to get that 30 minutes in. Okay, now you're knowing that guy's coming into the workout already stressed. He's leaving the workout already needing to be productive. What do? You can't smack him.
Yeah.
Because if you smack him in that 30 minutes, his day's wrecked.
Yep.
And if you push that workout into the afternoon, then his sleep's wrecked.
Yep.
So like, what are you doing as a coach to move and modulate what's happening in the right area? So this is the stuff that we think about all the time. And I'm sure that you look at that kind of range and the rate of recovery that we talk about, and you start to define that over the course of seasons. So I look at different periods, like you look at Istembe's model and Tudor Bompa's model, and then I've modified that for what I look for in high-end sports performance coaching. So I have, there are your 5 phases, right? So you have GPP. And again, that's going to be broken up into 1 and 2 and 3 potentially, right? SPP, right? Pre-competition, competition, and then peaking. So I have those windows. So the goal is always to peak at the right time.
Yep.
Now, peaking for the right time for let's say a high school athlete trying to make the team, that peaking may be in the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
Because if he doesn't peak in the beginning of the season,
there is
he's
no
not going to have a season. If it's a pro athlete trying to make the roster, he needs to peak during 2-a-days.
Yep.
Which is the majority of the veteran injuries happen is because they're not prepared. So they come into it ill prepared, and then they work through it, and then they end up getting hurt because it's too much too soon, volume and velocity at the same time. But if you're a vet and you're prepared for that, that's actually pre-competition. Then there's the competition season, and then there's playoffs, and then you want to have peaking. At the Olympic season cycle, it's like you probably have 3 peaks. You have a peak during the season so you could qualify. You have a peak during championships so that you can make it to the Olympics. And then you have a peak, obviously, at the Olympic cycle. And what's crazy is sometimes we're pulling that rubber band back and the athlete's ready to go, but we have to kind of hold them. We have to delay the response because they're ready now and their body's ready now. So we have to almost like navigate that and say, hey, you don't get to choose when your meets are. We have to almost artificially kind of create this and push this release later. So do you run into different, because what I would have done would be taking those 5 phases, and I overlap that kind of like a overhead projector where you put the little film on it and then put another film on it, and then it starts to open up, dating ourselves a little.
Yeah, we're old enough to remember that.
Yeah, I mean, I still use them because I think they're so valuable for me just to see it.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would do is, based upon the sport, the individual, and the circumstance, run their season phases out that way. And everyone's like, well, where does rehab go? Well, rehab has to get integrated, so it's not a phase. Rehab's an integration because sometimes rehab happens during the off season, sometimes happens in season. Sometimes you work around an injury, but if it's a peaking season, maybe you have to work through the injury, and it's just the cost of doing business. What do you do in the seasons for your athletes and individuals and regarding looking at that range in the recovery? Like, what do you do to kind of manage what's the priority for them in their life?
Yeah, I start, start with the end goal in mind. So we want to have this performance, we want to have it on this day, whatever that is. You can, again, if someone is not that competitive, you could set that up as an artificial constraint. We're going to retest you in 4 months or 3 months or whatever. So they have a testing date, they have a goal they're trying to hit. And then from there, I just start going backwards. Okay, we want to be here. Here's the qualities we want at this time. Okay, let's go all the way back to, we're going to start, here's our assessments. We're going to look at strength. We're going to look at your aerobic potential, whatever. So that those assessments should match where they want to go. And then you realize where their gaps are. So if you have someone who's already really strong, but their aerobic system is dog shit, okay, we know that, we're going to do more strength stuff. We need to get to this meet or whatever it is. But we know your aerobic system is really going to be hampering everything we're going to do. So we're going to load the aerobic or the GPP phase first. We're going to do that, get that pretty good, and then go forward from there.
Nice.
I know those things will be different, but what I like about it is it'll tell you what assessments you then need to run initially to see where the things are. And like the high level is, for example, powerlifting's easy because it's just max strength. It's easy to measure.
Yep.
In powerlifting, I never used to measure aerobic capacity because I'm like, well, who cares? Like, they're just doing a 1 round. And I started running into people who just had horrible recovery. We fixed their nutrition, we fixed their sleep, we did everything else. And the recovery was so horrible. It did like a VO2 max assessment on them, and they were like 21 milliliters per kg and just
literally dead.
not just bad.
Yeah, fat toast
Horrible.
potatoes out of shape.
Right. So now we need to address that before we can do the stuff that, yeah, who gives a shit what your aerobic thing is on the day of the meet? We don't care. But in order to get the high quality stimulus, the volume, the training we want in a compressed time window, we have to dedicate time to doing aerobic stuff. So that's not your rate limiter going forward.
Absolutely. That rate of recovery is critical in
Right.
between sets that you could
Yes.
gain from doing activity that's not necessarily valuable or correlating to your end goal, but it
Right.
actually helps your end goal that you integrate it in another area of your training.
Yeah.
I probably the most important question is when you define like the recovery and where somebody's systems are, you use the word dog shit. Is that the appropriate scientific terminology that you use as a scientist?
Yeah. Or really shitty.
All right.
That's the other one.
I just wanted to make sure because I think a lot of people want to learn and we use these terms nowadays. And I think dog shit's probably the best one for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
How does music play a part in your life? Someone who knows you a little bit, I think that you're fascinated with music and stuff. How does it play a part of your life?
I mean, I love music. I was here in Vegas. We were recording this, went to a concert last night, actually.
What did you see?
Went to see the band Down, which features Phil Anselmo from Pantera, Pepper Kean, who used to be in Corrosion and Conformity, the other guys from Crowbar. So it's kind of like a side project, and it's really, really good. And then the headliner was Danzig, which was also really, really good.
And you like to go like in anything, right? You get down these little rabbit holes and then you just get stuck in them and really, really cool. I find that fascinating is you're not a mainstream guy. You're really good at taking something that's at like the I would say like your dive bar level.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? But then you're bringing it to the mainstream because it's quite practical and you're finding the use case for it, whether it be in music or whether it be in science. When it comes to the music side, like why do you like non-mainstream bands so much? It doesn't mean you don't like some of the stuff that's popular, but why is it that you are fascinated with some of the skills or capabilities or music from people that are not really popular?
I think part of it is there's this sort of game of trying to find good music, and something being popular doesn't necessarily mean it's something you may like or not. There's some popular bands that I really like that I saw them play 50 people in a room, and now they're selling stadiums. I saw Five Finger Death Punch when they were playing 200 people in a room when they first started. Now they're selling out arenas like for years and years.
My uncle played in Three Doors Down used to open for him.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right? They used to open for him all the time in
nice.
Mobile, Alabama, and different spots. And then once Kryptonite came out, it was quite reversed, and he's lucky to get on a car.
Yeah.
So it's quite funny to see that play out. And the people that just put the time in that become really, really skilled.
Yeah.
So I think that's really
And it's
cool.
like the overnight, even so, it's like Five Finger Death Punch. He was in 2 bands before. I got to see him and actually met him. And then you saw him perform in like a 200 cap room, and you're like, holy shit, this is really good. Like the band is great. Like he can sing, he can do the death metal vocals, he can sing really, really well, clean vocals. So you realize that there's a lot of talent there, and that style of music for at least the metal rock scene is appealing. Like a lot of people like that kind of music, and you kind of go, yep, they're going to be pretty big. But you flip that with other bands. I was backstage when Slipknot played like their first performance outside of Iowa.
Oh, no well.
I knew the band, the Step Kings, were opening, so I worked for a radio station for a while. A guy got me in. So I got to watch them backstage from the top level. And it was insane. It was like the most crazy thing I've ever seen. These guys run around in costumes with jumpsuits on.
hell no.
This real heavy music. I remember watching it going, wow, this is amazing. But there's no way in hell this will ever be mainstream. Like this will be like complete underground. Completely wrong. Like, went on to become one of the biggest, metal bands
Of all time. Yeah.
recently. So it's fascinating to me how
At least in this generation, I think what's really cool is when you see those people early, you almost take ownership in their success.
Oh, sure. Yeah. You're like, I saw them on back in the day,
And when no one was
there, he was there.
Yeah. Now, personality wise, are you like mosh pitting it? Are you hitting people or are you going crazy? Are you just like a very tall version of Beavis and Butthead, just like nodding your head like a 90s cartoon?
More the later. I've been in many pits. Like the last pit I was in was probably 3 years ago for
You're a small guy. I just feel like I want to be, in the middle of that. I would probably throw a blow. I'm gonna slip an elbow if someone hits me like you. I don't know what else to do.
I remember watching Slayer at First Avenue years ago. Got my nose broke. I was up front. some guy fell in the pit right behind me. I went down to pick him up. Someone else just inadvertently just hit me in the face. So I'm standing up front. Blood's just running down the front of my shirt.
That's a cool
But
shirt now.
I was right up next to the front. So I'm like, well, I'm not leaving. Like, there's this, So I watch the whole show. I leave. My shirt's just covered in blood. Nobody bats an eye. They're just like, oh, yeah, great show. Awesome, awesome. I don't go in the pits quite as much now because I have this aversion to injuries because I know it's going to cost me and I won't be able to kiteboard and do other things like that. So it's kind of like pick your battles, but yeah, normally like up front, like as close as I can get to the stage.
Cool. Well, I like that you still enjoy it and you still do crazy shit. I really love the fact that you have taken something that's very complex that you're seeing similar to your work in science and physics and kind of mathematics, this ability to kind of like reverse engineer a goal, but then find the one little piece RV car that's like broken, put it back together.
They're looking
and
for
it's
the leverage and like the brakes.
Yeah.
Like the client, like, okay, what points, if they do this action, they'll have an exponential output. And then what is like, are they running around with the parking brake still on? Like, what are the things that are like holding them back?
And if you just release that, I think that you get so much more value. So I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
And it's motivating. It's like, man, I just did this
Yeah.
thing that my coach told me because he found it out. And then all of a sudden, everything else became easier.
Yeah.
So I love that. I love that you've been able to take, this idea of I'm really interested in music and skill and this thing that you like, it resonates with you. And you're riding that wave with them in their careers, and then it becomes mainstream. And that's really cool. Right or wrong, doesn't matter. You enjoyed it you enjoyed it whether there was 50 people there or 5,000. And I think that's really cool. And then the same thing with you being able to take these very complex scenarios, in the science level and bring it to trainers today within your certifications. And I mean, you dissected Cal, for example, and being able to kind of, work with him on triphasic and turn that in. Like, that's a very complex mind, but it's also, it became very practical for college athletics. It became very practical for coaches because your ability to kind of disseminate a very complex environment and then make it very practical for people because it's simplified and it's very useful, I find to be amazing. I think that you do that within your education, your certifications, you do that within your courses, you do that whether it be music, whether it be, kiteboarding, like all of that stuff. I just find it fascinating. I appreciate you. I think that's really important to give recognition where it's deserved, whether it be, teaching with the most detailed stuff within the eyes and the neurals in the brain to your, treatment where you put your hands on a body to, you helping somebody technically with their training or nutrition. So I think that you're inspiring a lot of people. You're giving a lot of coaches the confidence that they need to not be, I don't have a biomedical engineer background. I don't have a nutritional background. I don't have a science background. And you give trainers the tools to be able to go to market with the level of confidence and conviction that they're helping their clients because of the work that you've been able to pour into them. So I appreciate that. I think you're doing some great work in the market.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's been fun. It's going to be a great few days here in Vegas. To help you and the brand and the business. I'm proud to have you in the coach's room. I'm proud to have you. For me, it's just being around good people that are great at what they do, and you're one of them. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for all your help and guidance. Everything has been super, super helpful. I appreciate it.
And I got a lot of pride in supporting the right people. All right.
Awesome, man.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Man.
Appreciate it.